Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you not from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city. Instead from Radio Row down here in New Orleans, getting ready for Super Bowl 59. And fired up you were here with us, Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali, back there on the ones and twos in studio. And we have, as you might imagine, got a lot to do here as the intensity's kind of ratcheted up. Yesterday when the morning show crew got cranked up at 7 a.m., it was a little sleepy around here. Not the case anymore. There are a lot of folks here, and we're going to be talking to plenty of them over the next 2 hours. Caroline Fenton, LSU alum, who is now with Yahoo, is going to join us in 15 minutes. Glen West, normal spot, talking LSU hoops and baseball with him. Darren Smith, the top of hour number 2. He's with KLKC up in Kansas City, covers the Chiefs. We'll talk to him about the Chiefs looking for history, a three-peat in the Super Bowl coming up here. We got to do our LSU baseball position preview. We'll talk right field. Really fired up at 2:30. We're going to welcome Major League Baseball legend Curt Schilling to the set here and talk to him about a lot of things revolving around baseball. And he's also here on behalf of the World War II Museum, so we'll talk to him about that as well. But we start things off with a leadoff hitter. We go with Sharief Ishaq, WDSU. If I was going through the guest list there and you're like, wait, where's Sharief? Well, he got bumped for Curt Schilling because Curt Schilling has like 3,100 strikeouts, and you have none.
I've struck out 3,100 times.
So we're going to go ahead and put you at the top of the order here. Sharief joins us. We have to start the same way we start every single day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
All right, let's get things cranked up here on this Tuesday. Sharief, the Super Bowl's in your city here. I would imagine you've probably been to one of these, whether or not you went to Miami or whatnot. But this one in New Orleans, this is special for a lot of people around here.
I tell people, like, no city can rival New Orleans when it comes to the Super Bowl because it's an easy city to walk. You can go to all the bars. You can go to Bourbon Street. You can go Frenchman. You can go to all the restaurants. You go wherever bars you want to go to. You can go CBD. You can eat anywhere. You can go to the Dome easily. It's walkable. This whole thing is walkable. And you know, the best thing about this week is the weather's great.
Yeah, we're lucking out there. I mean, this could have been 2 weeks ago when we had a bunch of snow on the ground.
I hated
that would have been an absolute
covering snow, 10 inches of snow. I never want to see an ounce of snow again.
That was no good. But it's going to be good here. But there was some news in Saints land, obviously, on Super Bowl week. The report from Adam Schefter comes out on the Pat McAfee show, says, hey, barring any hiccups here, Kellen Moore is going to be the guy. We talked about it last week, kind of thought it was trending that direction. But you got a chance to talk to Kellen Moore last night as the Eagles participated in Media Day. What was that like? He kind of talked about it a little bit off the air, but he can't speak to it because they can't officially agree to terms next week. But y'all were all right there in the mix.
Oh, man. I've never seen an assistant coach have so many media members around him like I saw Kellen Moore yesterday for the entire hour. The New Orleans contingency just sitting there talking to him, peppering him with a million different questions, trying to get him to break. But he was not breaking. He was like Fort Knox. The guy was not saying much. I think Larry Holder might have asked him a question. Hey, can you get used to coaching here, being here, since, you know, you might be here? And he kind of laughed and chuckled. And he was like, yeah, you know, I enjoy playing here. It's a tough place to play. And he also mentioned, you know, about being at the Manning Passing Academy a while back whenever he was a quarterback at Boise State, which he was awesome, 50-3, still holds the record, most wins for a college, you know, quarterback in college football history. But, yeah, he talked about all that kind of stuff. He didn't really want to – he said the interview process went great, and that's about as far as he got with the whole Saints coaching search. But yes, it's going to be
based on your tone, like he did handle himself pretty well. I mean, he had to know what was coming in this city based on what his last 2 weeks have been like. But I mean, that's still kind of a pressure-packed spot to know that you're getting all these questions. Everyone knows what's going on, and you can't really go there. It makes things a little more difficult to stay composed, I would guess.
Look, he's dealing with the biggest game of his life.
Yes. I didn't even mention that.
And he's also dealing with us New Orleans media trying to ask him about a job that, like, he can't really say much about because of league policies, and the Saints can't really name him until after the Super Bowl. So it's like he's kind of in a tough place. But, you know, he handled it well. I mean, he handled, like, what type of coach he can be. And I thought he was quiet, but he wasn't quiet. It was like he was kind of a talkative guy, kind of laughed, and that's good to see he has good personality.
Do you think this is a risk for the Saints?
With risk comes reward. it's time to go outside the box, right? They've played it safe, with Dennis Allen, defensive coach. It's time to move away from the Sean Payton, coaching tree. Guys he hired or guys he knows. It's time to go outside the building. Just rip it apart. Good or bad, you got to try something different.
Right. And this is a tough question to answer, but I think more just for the discussion. There was a report from I think it was Diana Rossini that said that Kellen Moore was not enamored with Derek Carr as the franchise quarterback. That may have put things in a snag as far as Kellen Moore to the Saints may go. And then the next day she came back and goes, maybe he's okay with it. What do you sense from that situation? Obviously, Kellen Moore and Derek Carr are contemporaries.
Yes. We just talked to Diana literally right before you texted
awesome.
me. We went over there and talked to her and asked her, it's like, hey, is Derek Carr going to be part of Kellen Moore's plan? She goes, yeah, I think he's going to be here next year. And I might have to agree with her. Like it or not, he's probably going to be here next year because he probably doesn't want to go into a season that it could turn out bad. You need to have a quarterback. I just don't think he wanted to go in there with the other options unless they say this isn't it for us. We need
That's
to maybe
the deal.
draft a guy.
It's so easy for a fan and certainly for us here in the media to go, hey, just cut Derek Carr, eat the dead money, put Spencer Rattler out there, win 3 games, and get the second pick in the draft. But that's not really, generally speaking, how organizations run. It sounds nice for us to say that, but you've got a lot of people that are involved that are not really in the business of trying to lose games.
I mean, that's, what we say.
Yeah.
What we say is not what they're going to do because it's a multi-billion-dollar football team. You don't risk versus reward. You don't know if you can come back from that. Some teams have never come back from trying to tank and get a quarterback. I mean, look, some of the teams like the Browns.
Yeah.
You could turn into the Browns. You could turn into, I'm not saying the Jets tank, but you could turn into the Jets. You could turn into the Panthers. Maybe their franchise turns around. But it's a risk you're taking. You're always taking a risk. Look, it worked for the Commanders. Mm-hmm. They got Jaden Daniels. I mean,
we don't know if it worked for the Bears.
Yeah, it didn't work for the Bears. So that's the problem. The risk you're going to take, that's just not Mickey Loomis's thinking. They want to stay competitive. Now, maybe it's not done purposely. Maybe they do struggle again in his first year coaching. It's going to take a little while.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little while. In 2 years, their cap's going to be good.
Yes. If they don't add to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's what they're going to try avoiding here in the next couple years. I think they'll be fine with the cap and they'll be able to bring it back.
And that would be a shift in philosophy, and that's really all we're asking for here is to realize that there's been an error here. You did what you could do at that time. Now you got to your point, move on and move in a different direction. You also got a chance to talk to Doug Nussmeier, who coaches the quarterbacks here for Philadelphia, and there's rumor that he could be attached with Kellen Moore. What did you learn on that? Obviously, that name pretty familiar in Baton Rouge.
We're trying to get him to break about Kellen and the type of coach he is. He's just laughed it off and said he's a good leader, very smart, very innovative. But he also talked about Garrett and just the job that Garrett Nussmeier has done and his son and how good he's going to be.
If Doug interviews like Garrett, then he didn't give you anything last night because Garrett Nussmeier couldn't be more cordial in the interview room. Couldn't be more polite, but he doesn't say squat. We tried to get him to push on like, hey, what do you think about you facing off against Jackson Dart? What do you think about you facing off against Jalen Miller? He's like, I think we're playing Ole Miss on Saturday.
He's a coach's
not
son.
Gonna do anything. Yeah,
and that's how Doug was kind of like that. We got him to break a little bit when we talked about his time here in New Orleans as a quarterback under Jim Moore. He's like, because Fletcher showed him the video the time that he was playing with the Saints. He goes, did you guys have to go like across the street under the tunnel to dig out that video? And I was like, probably so. The video is pretty old. But, that's the most personality he showed whenever we talked about his time with the Saints.
So we thinking Monday, Tuesday for this? I mean, I guess it maybe depends on how the result of the game goes. If there's a parade or something, like, who knows? I don't know what they got to deal with. But thinking Monday or Tuesday?
I say it drops Monday morning and they introduce him Tuesday.
Does the Super Bowl do that ridiculous
press conference
next morning press conference like the national championship?
Absolutely.
Who invented that?
I think it's ridiculous.
Didn't Sean Payton just show up to that in sunglasses in Miami?
Look, that was weird in Miami. It's like everyone was partying throughout the entire night into the morning, and then you're asking guys to show up at like 8 o'clock in the morning to talk about something you just talked about literally like 7-8 hours ago.
I don't think Kellen Moore's got to be involved in that because he's the offensive coordinator, but it's still a terrible idea.
They would never introduce him the same day, so it'd have to be Tuesday or Wednesday.
All right, and it's interesting. It'll be kind of a new era. What do you think the air of the town will feel about that hire and about kind of something new?
They'll talk themselves into it.
Yeah.
At first they were like, Kellen Moore, and then now they're like, Kellen Moore. All right, Yeah, I think that
Do you think there's a 1-year grace period?
You got to give them a couple years. You can't just be mad if they go 5-12 and be like, he's got to have a couple years. You got to give him the grace period. I'm assuming he's probably telling him I need that 5-year contract, and he deserves to have that 5-year contract. So, yeah, he deserves the grace period. You can't just get mad at him.
Everyone knows the current state of the franchise is not good.
If Dennis got 2.5 years, he should get 5 years. I mean, that's just how it needs to go.
It's the Saints have not been interesting for a couple of months. They got it.
Months.
Well, they were interesting in
3
September.
Years. I mean,
they were interested in September.
But you knew what was coming.
And then you had to think about whether or not they're going to fire Dennis Allen. When are they going to fire Dennis Allen? And there was a little, and then it just went flat. It went flat line. And now there's at least a little something to chew on there.
Yeah, at least Kellen Moore brings you. Oh man, look what he did with the Eagles. Yeah. Yes, he's not bringing Saquon, Jalen to deep the offensive line, but which coach from a good team is bringing their good players?
None.
I mean, he's going to have.
But in this transfer portal in college, they do.
Yes, and unfortunately, the Saints don't have the salary cap to do that type of stuff. But he'll be able to put his fingerprints on his franchise, on his own team, and do whatever he wants.
Who wins on Sunday?
I like the Philadelphia Eagles. Not because I'm tired of the Chiefs. I like the Philadelphia Eagles. I like what they do with their offense. I like how they control the clock. I love how they have Saquon, and I like how Kellen Moore uses his pieces the right way. And I like their defense forces turnovers. So I think they get their revenge from the Super Bowl a couple years ago.
We'll see. Sharief Ishaq from WDSU with us every Tuesday. Made some time for us on Radio Row. Go find some famous people and talk to them.
You're the most famous person I've talked to.
That is not true. You just gave me a list of like 3 guys that are far more famous.
Patrick Peterson. Yeah, I did talk to him.
He's a little bit better than me. I don't want to play him in golf either. So, yeah, there's plenty of him walking around. Get after it. That's Sharief Ishaq from WDSU. Good enough to give us a little bit of time here on this Tuesday. We'll step aside. Caroline and Fenton get a jump aboard from Yahoo Sports. That's next on the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge. GenesisofBatonRouge.com is the website. Every car on the lot is online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com. Safety important to you? Of course it is. If you're buying a vehicle, you got to make sure that you've got one of the safest on the road. Every single vehicle in the line of Genesis vehicles is given the IIHA Top Safety Award. Some of them were Top Safety Awards plus. They take safety very, very seriously at Genesis. You get behind the wheel, you can tell how stylish it is. You can see all the great features, all the bells and whistles. Brand Ambassador is going to be able to give you all the information that you're going to need, and you're going to know that you're in one of the safest vehicles on the road. Stop by and see them there at Airline Highway at PQ, right across from Women's Hospital. You can also check them out online at GenesisofBatonRouge.com. Genesis of Baton Rouge, GenesisofBatonRouge.com.
The Hunt Palmer Show, live from Super Bowl 59 Radio Row in New Orleans. Presented by L'Auberge Casino Hotel, Baton Rouge.
Hanging out here on Radio Row, we are presented by L'Auberge Hotel and Casino in Baton Rouge. Now joined by Caroline Fenton, LSU Tiger with Yahoo Sports. Caroline, thanks so much for the time. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be back in Louisiana. I'm living in Nashville now, so every chance I can get to come back here, and especially when it's the freaking Super Bowl, it's an absolute blast. I'm doing great.
What do you got to check off your New Orleans list when you're here for the week?
I have to obviously do like the touristy things. Like I always have to do a Café du Monde.
Okay.
There's always people that like roll their eyes and call me a tourist, but it's like it's a classic for a reason. I always have to get a good po' boy. It's usually Arno's. If I can make way over to Arno's, it's always a shrimp po' boy, and then just a whole lot of drinking too.
That can happen around here. I got to drive back to Baton Rouge the next 3 nights, or I would be right there alongside you. I'm curious. This is your first Super Bowl, you said, and we were talking about that. Like I've done SEC Media Days. I've done 2 national championships. This is that times like 30. This is, and we're not even close to game day. We're 4 days out.
I think the craziest thing to me, and obviously, like, we're sitting on Radio Row, I'm looking over at all of these sponsored tents and these setups. Like where I'm over with Yahoo Sports, we have a full car on the set. Like it is, like everything is just ratcheted up so many different levels. The craziest thing to me, though, was because I'm with you. I've been to national championships, I've been to media days, I've been to senior bowls, all big time events with so many eyes on those events. It's the number of people that I've seen come from different countries, like internationally. I listened to so many different languages being spoken last night at Media Night. People from Germany, people from Brazil, people from the UK, people from France. Like, all eyes in the world are on this event.
We assumed the table next to us was speaking Spanish. I mean, NFL's big in Mexico. We know that. They play there every year. Well, Alondra Villarreal is fluent in Spanish. She produces our morning show, and she was here yesterday, and she listened for a second. She goes, nope. That's Portuguese. I was like, Portuguese. I had no idea that they would have it's Monday of Super Bowl week, and they're speaking Portuguese here. So this is a whole different
huge
world.
in Brazil too.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I like when we can break out of our little purple and gold bubble, which we're in very much in Baton Rouge. You've broken out. You're in Nashville. You do a lot of national college football talk and whatnot. I feel like from inside Baton Rouge that LSU has as strong a brand as it's ever had because of Burrow and Chase and Jefferson and the national championship. And then you go to Jaden and Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors and even Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz and Olivia Dunn and Angel Reese. And it just feels like this is a 6-year run that I've never really seen before. Does it play like that out in the national scene?
It absolutely does, and I even think in the national scene it doesn't even get as much credit as it deserves, and it really does get a whole lot of credit. But all of those names that you just listed are not just some of the biggest names that came out of LSU. Those are some of the biggest names in the NFL. Yeah. Those are some of the biggest names in Major League Baseball. Those are some of the biggest names in NIL. So I think it absolutely does play on a national stage, and from the LSU perspective, it couldn't happen at a more perfect time. We're now living in an era of college sports where money is the most important thing, where your brand is the most important thing. That's a legitimate thing that Brian Kelly, that any coach at LSU can sell to prospective recruits of look, if you come here, you're going to have a massive brand. So I do think it absolutely plays on a national stage. But when we talk about, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jaden Daniels, I think a lot of people outside of this purple and gold bubble are like, oh, wait, yeah, those three guys played on the same team together. That's right. That I kind of feel like I have to be a little bit of an ambassador to remind people that those three were on the same team and there was so much talent on that team. So yeah, even still, I think it gets lost a little bit in translation because it is kind of inconceivable from the outside looking in that there is as much talent and there is as much star power that came out of Baton Rouge over the last few years.
And then you see the national people who put those dots together, and then they go to Wikipedia and check this team's record, and they're like, well, how did that happen?
How?
And then how do you explain that?
And that and we were talking about this off air, I think, now I even feel the same way, but especially standing the test of time over the next 20, 30 years, we will look back on 2023 LSU and think about that as what could have been. I've had this fight on social media, even with LSU fans. And it is shocking to me, and I don't know if you hear it, in Baton Rouge or any callers that call into the radio show, the number of people that I have heard making excuses for that team going 9-3 there was no talent on the defensive side of the ball. No talent on the defensive side of the ball? What do you mean? You've got guys that are going to play on Sundays and guys that are playing on Sundays that were on that defensive side of the ball. It was one of the most irresponsible and disgusting management of talent that I've ever seen on that side of the ball. So it's so frustrating for me, I know to you, to so many LSU fans, to see Jaden Daniels, who's going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, also candidates for Offensive Rookie of the Year, seeing Jaden Daniels elevate a franchise that has been swimming in the sea of suck over the last 20 years and bringing them to the first NFC Championship game in however many years. It's frustrating to see what could have been, what should have been, but that's ultimately going to be something that Brian Kelly has to wear and has to own up to for the foreseeable future.
They changed the whole staff entering this past year, and now they go into the portal and they went shopping at just about every position. Do we feel a little bit better about next year?
I think for sure. And I have to give Brian Kelly a lot of credit. I give Brian Kelly a lot of flack, rightfully so. He put his money where his mouth is, literally, because he got up at the podium and said, we are going to go, for lack of a better word, big game hunting. And they did. And they dished out the cash that they weren't willing to dish out in a couple of years previously. So I do feel better about this team moving forward. I'm hesitant about getting too high about transfer portal classes because we saw what happened with Ole Miss. I mean, Lane Kiffin was the portal king. Ole Miss invested so much money in the transfer portal, and then Ole Miss fell short of expectations. And it's crazy that a team that had never been to the college football playoff had an expectation of getting to the college football playoff. But that's exactly where we are in the transfer portal world, in the NIL world, is you can microwave success. That the expectations get so much higher. So, yes, I'm encouraged, but I also need to see Brian Kelly put all of the pieces together before I can say that he can for sure do it. Because it's kind of been right place, wrong time, or, good thing here, bad thing there over the last 3 years with Brian Kelly, whether it's special teams in year one, defense in year two, and the offense taking a step back in year three.
I think when Ole Miss did what they did to Georgia and Oxford and just just embarrassed them for 4 quarters. That to me was the proof of concept. Like, this works. Yes, they lost to Kentucky. They did go to Florida and play a hot team and got beat. But I don't think of it as like, well, that was a stupid idea to go spend $20 million in that roster. Like, they proved they took on the big bad wolf of the SEC and they smoked them on their home field. Like,
you know who else spent $20 million on their roster? Ohio State. And they won a national championship.
Exactly. How do we feel about the way that the college football playoff went as far as the selection, the host sites? Like, we've seen it once now. I've seen a lot of mixed reviews. I think a lot of people in this state, well, me and Hester butt heads on it. Me and Matt are kind of on the same page on it. But how did you see it play out in the first run?
I think they did some things right, and I think there are things that absolutely positively need to change. And it's going to be hard to change in 2025 because you do need a unanimous decision to make those changes. And when you have group of 5 commissioners that are going to have to vote, they're not going to vote what would hurt the group of 5. But I think the way that the seating went was moronic. There's no other playoff in sports. There's no other tournament in the world that seeds the way that the college football playoff did. And the fact that Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, the number 1 overall seed, the only undefeated team in the country, had the path that they had, like, that's ridiculous. So I think that the seeding needs to change. I think that conference champions should get an automatic bid. I do not think that conference champions should get an automatic bye. It's comical to me that Arizona State and Boise State both had first-round byes when you have teams like Ohio State that were playing in the first round. So I think that needs to change. We can talk all day long about whether or not Indiana and SMU belonged. We can talk all day long about how Alabama would have been a much more competitive and a much more compelling game at Notre Dame than we saw with Indiana. Overall, I think you're kind of getting into sticky territory because we're debating 2 teams on completely different fields. Like, we are debating 2 different teams that had drastically different schedules. So I think that in order to have a more fair playoff system and more fair playoff seedings, we need to have more standardization with scheduling. I don't know how that works in a conference structure, but that's the next step to me.
It cuts out the group of 5, I think. Honestly, you've
yeah.
got to play it like the NFC and the AFC in college football, I would think. I mean, do you feel like you are in the majority in it from a national perspective? Again, we're kind of in this bubble here. You have more national conversations than we do. Do you feel like most people feel the same way you do?
In terms of the seeding, yes, 100%. I don't really know how there can be an argument to say that, yes, the seeding was correct, that, yes, Boise State, who got run out of the building in Phoenix against Penn State, deserved to have a first-round bye when it was a team that was the 7th-ranked team in the country when all was said and done, but the 3rd-seeded team, wherever they were seeded. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. I do think, though, in terms of scheduling, there's a lot of back and forth about what that might look like, about can we cut out the group of 5 completely. That's not necessarily fair when you see a Boise State team that deserved to be in the field but maybe didn't deserve to have a first-round bye. How do you standardize scheduling? Because let's say if LSU scheduled Florida State this year instead of 2022 and 2023, well, that might look like a really strong strength of schedule, but then they went 2-10. So it's hard to it's hard to standardize scheduling, but I think that has to be the next step. That it's not fair that an Alabama team that went 9-3 with the top 15 ranked strength of schedule is going up against SMU that plays St. Mary's School of the Blind.
I'm on your team on that one. I don't have any use for watching SMU really play ever. That's kind of the way that I feel. We're chatting with Caroline Fenton here from Yahoo Sports. A couple more.
Yeah.
Are you sick of the Chiefs?
I am.
Okay.
Nate Burleson, who was on the CBS broadcast after the AFC Championship game, gaslit everyone by saying you should enjoy witnessing greatness.
That's what I say.
That's great and all. And if you do enjoy it, then that's wonderful. Enjoy every single second of it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm tired of it.
Okay.
I'm over it. I was looking at the ticket prices. That's been a whole thing that the ticket prices for the Super Bowl are down 30% what they were last year.
I never look at the ticket price for the Super Bowl.
$9,000.
Yeah, it's absurd.
But they're down year over year, and sure, you can make an argument that that's because everyone's sick and tired of the Chiefs, and everyone's sick and tired of the Chiefs and Eagles. I think it's more so these fan bases have been here before. The Chiefs fans might say, well, we already spent $20,000 on the Super Bowl last year, and the year before that, and 2 years before that, so we don't really need need to spend the money to come to New Orleans because we've been here before, and we'll probably more than likely be back here next year or a couple of years after. So yeah, I'm tired of it. How fun would it have been if we could have had the Lions and the Bills, or the Commanders and the Bills? That would have been a blast. That would have been so fun. So I would love to see a little bit of variety. I do understand and appreciate the greatness that we're witnessing with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and the dynasty that they have had and the run that they're on, but I'm tired of it. Give me something new.
Where can the good people of Baton Rouge find all your stuff these days?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at CarolineFenton1. I also host the College Football Power Hour for Yahoo Sports, and I'm on SiriusXM College Sports Radio as well.
Awesome. We'll go get a po' boy. We appreciate your time.
Appreciate y'all.
That's Caroline Fenton from Yahoo. We'll come back with Glen West to go 24/7 Sports next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets, onebathandclosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. Look, safety's a big deal in the bathroom, especially as folks age. If that could be a concern for someone in your life that's aging but wants to stay at home, call David Duvall and One Bath and Closets. They can put in non-slip floors. They can put in handrails around the slippery areas. They can put in a walk-in tub or a shower with the bench on it. All those things could mitigate what could be a really hazardous situation in the bathroom. I was talking to David Duvall last week, and he said that someone had reached out just last week to talk about all the things that I tell you about every single week right here, and that's awesome to hear, and certainly that's a wonderful story for David Duvall and his team. So go to onebathandclosets.com, check out the pictures of their great work, look at the testimonials from their satisfied clients, and start that process with a free consultation today. It's onebathandclosets.com. David Duvall and One Bath and Closets, onebathandclosets.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
We're here on Radio Row in New Orleans, presented by LeBair's Hotel and Casino, Baton Rouge. Really, really appreciate those fine folks for making this entire week possible. It's been a great start to the week, and we are just getting rolling. Appreciate Sharief, Ishaq, and Caroline Fenton for jumping aboard from here at Radio Row. Now we'll head out to Jim's Firearms Hotlines, where we find our guy Glen West to go 24/7, talk a little Tigers. Glenn, how are you, sir?
Doing great, Hunt. I'm from the New Orleans area, so, Long John Silver's unfortunately closed, so I don't have any seafood recommendations for you down in New Orleans, so I apologize.
I'll just have to wait till I get back to Baton Rouge and get some corks. I'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little basketball. I talked about it on my show yesterday pretty candidly. Saturday was eye-opening to me. Everybody in the SEC is going to have one of their 18 games where they don't play very well. But to me, when you add the 30-point loss to Texas with the fact that they're 1-7, it starts to feel a little heavier. What was your sense inside the PMAC on Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably the first time this season where I just kind of looked at this team and I thought, like, this is just not going in a very good direction. I mean, I know that they've been on a downward spiral for most of conference play, but, there have been some times, especially against Auburn and Alabama, where I thought that they've competed well and they've been able to hang with some of these SEC teams. But this was the first time where LSU just looked totally outclassed and out-coached, out-prepared against a team that they should have been more competitive with. And this was, I think you said it the right way, eye-opening in a lot of different ways. And I wrote kind of in my piece afterwards, like, there's going to be some bigger conversations that need to happen, after this season about how this team can go about putting a more competitive group on the court in the coming years. I mean, they did not look very prepared in that second half. They got just totally, boat raced in that second half. They were very overmatched and outclassed in a lot of ways. And that comes back to coaching at the end of the day.
How much of it do you think?
I guess on the court, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Things.
So how much of it can you say? Look, it's 18 games. That's just a stinker. And how much of it is kind of what we're both agreeing with? I'm kind of trying to play devil's advocate a little bit because I've made my case very clear. But I mean, you're not going to play 18 great basketball games. Every once in a while, you're going to. I mean, Auburn beat South Carolina by 2 points, but that's their D game. LSU's D game, they get beat by 30. I mean, how much of it is just that's a bad day at the office?
Yeah, it's the floor, I think, of this team for sure. I don't know that they will have another game like that where they just completely just don't look the part. I think that they have proven at times this year where they are a second half team and they can they play better in the second half. So I'm not going to take too much stock in just like from a one game perspective. Like, I don't think we're going to see more 30-point blowouts in the coming weeks ahead. But I think it's just, for me, and I guess for you as well, it just feels like there's bigger conversations that need to be had about where this program is going and how they can field more competitive rosters going forward.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, this is the first off season, I guess, LSU's had where there haven't been a whole bunch of, kind of restrictions. Like, this was the first off season where Matt McMahon and his staff could really go out and recruit at the level that they needed to. And look, I've been one of the bigger supporters of the fact that you just can't overlook the loss of a Jalen Reed or Tyrell Ward to begin the year. This is going to be the same team that you thought it was going in. And, but at the same time, like, there's been some, and a lot of these guys have really struggled to adjust to the physicality of this league. And that's not going to just go away next year either. I mean, like, they have to go out there and have to shake the right hands. They have to find the right guys that can fit this SEC, where the SEC is right now in basketball. And I think it's very fair to say that there are very few teams, if any, that you would put below LSU right now in terms of where they are as a program, where they are, competing week in or game in and game out. And I just think there's a lot of stuff that Matt McMahon's going to have to answer for this off season. It's going to be the biggest off season of his career, in my opinion.
What do you think the 18-game record looks like?
I'm sorry, you're cutting out on me, Hunt.
Yeah, that's all right, I'm back. Where do you think the 18-game record, where do you think that ends up?
I think it's probably going to be around 3 or 4, maybe 5 wins. I mean, like, it's not good right now. I just don't see how there's any way you can look at any of these games, even against, some of these teams that are kind of at the bottom of the league, just like LSU. I mean, they play at Georgia. I mean, I don't know that LSU is going to be favored to go into Georgia and win a game. I mean, they got Ole Miss coming up. They got, they got some of the bottom of the barrel teams that they should be able to compete with and beat, but they got to go out and do it first. And they haven't shown that they can do that on a consistent basis outside of that Arkansas game. So if they can get back to playing the competition, the physicality that they played with against Alabama and in Auburn, then I think they have a chance against some of these other teams. But it was just such an eye-opener on Saturday that this was really just kind of shocking at how poorly they played there. And honestly, in times where you need to be playing your best, when you've got your backs against the walls on the season, to have a half like that blow up as big as it did, I thought was just really inexcusable and something that they're going to have to really prepare for, prepare better for going forward here.
Well, let's do what a lot of folks are going to do. Let's turn the page and look at baseball. Obviously, LSU's been in practice for 2 weeks. They've got a week and change before they take the field for the first time next Friday afternoon. I want to talk briefly about the outfield. What do you kind of feel like is the pecking order at this moment, with the understanding we know it can change really rapidly?
For sure. Yeah, I think that, I feel pretty good about 2 positions right now in the outfield. I think that Chris Stanfield pretty much appears to be a shoo-in at center field. I think he's really improved his bat as the fall and spring have kind of gotten going here, and he's just a very dynamic athlete that you want out there in that center field spot, and he's got some experience. So I think he's probably going to be your starting center fielder on day one. I would imagine that Derek Curiel, the freshman, is going to handle one of the 2 corner spots. In Sunday scrimmage I was able to go to, he was out there in left field, and he's just somebody that the hype is legit on Derek Curiel. Like, if anybody has followed LSU baseball even a little bit this offseason, they've heard about him, and I think he's going to be the next great one here in the outfield. So I would expect him to be one of the corner spots. And then I think the other one is probably going to be Jake Brown. I could see Josh Pearson, Ashton Larson, those 3 maybe interchanging at least to start the year. But I feel pretty good about Stanfield and Curiel having 2 of those 3 spots, and LSU just maybe piecing it together matchup based or pitcher based, whatever they want to do on a given day with those other three guys.
Would you have been surprised in August if I had told you that Ashton Larson probably wouldn't start on opening day after the year he had last year where he led LSU in hitting in SEC play and then went to the Cape and was the outstanding player for his Cape Cod team?
Yeah, I would be. I mean, I thought he was poised to be, kind of that next big time player here. And look, he still can be. I mean, we got to wait to see how this season plays out for him. But he's got a lot more competition there than I think he probably expected. And you got to earn your spot. And there are guys right now that are just playing better. And so I think Jake Brown is another one. I mean, I thought Jake Brown was going to be a fixture in the lineup every day, and I don't know that that's going to happen, at least to start the year. So like I think there are guys that are going to really push each other to be their best, and we'll see kind of what that looks like in non-conference play. If somebody can steal a spot or secure kind of what their role is in non-conference play, then I think Jay Johnson's gonna roll with that. But I also think this is going to be a rotation for sure in the outfield at catcher. We'll see kind of what happens at third base, but I think that there are a couple guys potentially at third base that could play a lot of meaningful innings for LSU this year. So, I think there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching here these first 5-6 weeks of the season.
Whenever I do one of these weekly spots like yours is, I have to kind of put myself a week ahead. What's going to happen between now and the time I talk to you again? And we're going to be pretty close to opening day by the time I chat with you again. So I'll ask you one more time. I think I did this last week as well. Do you have a feeling on who you think the first pitcher is for LSU that takes the ball on next Friday?
Yeah, I think I probably told you Cade Anderson last week. I'm going to stick with Cade Anderson again. I mean, I got a chance to watch him this weekend as well, and he was extremely dominant in his innings. Jay Johnson's spoken very highly of him, and he seems to have really taken that next step. And I think he's poised to be that Friday night guy to start. We'll see if something changes between now and February 14th, but I think he's the guy right now that I think that I'm personally looking at as potentially that starter.
We're still kind of learning the Jay Johnson ways. We had so much track record with Maneri. I feel pretty good that I think Gavin Guidry would probably get the ball if it was Paul Maneri, because he was big on the Lifetime Achievement Award as the opening day starter. He did that for a few guys. Lewis Coleman got the ball. Ben Alsop got the ball one time. He did that a lot.
Caleb Gilbert.
Yeah, Caleb Gilbert got it as well. So, so I think that would maybe where Maneri goes, but I'm with you. I think Anderson is the guy. All right, give me a Super Bowl winner.
I'm no schmuck. I'm not picking against the Chiefs. I'd love to see somebody other than them win it, but they've been too dominant this year to believe that anyone's going to beat them. So I think Kansas City gets it done.
2 consecutive guests that are sick of the Chiefs. I'm on the other side. I like watching the greatness. I like watching Mahomes deal, and I think if he wins another Super Bowl, another MVP, that's really cool to watch. So we'll see. They'll play it in New Orleans coming up on Sunday. We'll talk next week, and we'll talk a lot of baseball then, Glenn. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Hunt. Appreciate it.
Glen West, senior writer over at Go 24/7. All your recruiting needs, all your team coverage. Glenn, Sonny, and the whole team over there at 24/7 Sports have got you covered. Glenn's with us every single Tuesday. All right, that's 3 straight guests to lead off the show, so I'll talk a little bit in the next segment. We'll close it out talking about a couple of additions to LSU's football staff, and we are just loaded in the second hour as well, as you'd imagine, here from Radio Row. Darren Smith from KLKC up in Kansas City is going to join us at 2 o'clock to talk about these Chiefs. Kurt Schilling, MLB legend, 3,000 strikeout club, and one of the all-time greats in baseball history, will be with us at 2:30. He's here with the World War II Museum, and I've got a lot of questions for him about the state of baseball currently, and then about some of the old stories he can tell. Bloody Sock might come up. 9/11 World Series might come up as well. So really excited for that conversation coming up in 45 minutes. Matt's shaking his head because the Yankees can't get it done in the World Series, but you got to get a better closer than Mariano Rivera if you're trying to nail down a World Series. It's just Luis Gonzalez, flare in the center field, ball game's over. We'll talk to Kurt Schilling about all that coming up in hour number 2. Stick with us, The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here, Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show from Radio Row at Super Bowl 59. We're brought to you by L'Auberge Hotel and Casino in Baton Rouge. They're good enough to allow us to be here all week long, and it's been a lot of fun. We're just getting started. As we mentioned, a lot to do in hour number 2. We'll start things off talking a little Kansas City Chiefs, but let's wrap up hour number 1 first here, talking a little LSU football. 2 hires were announced by LSU, reported to be coming towards LSU, weren't announced by LSU football, but reports were that LSU added a couple of analysts to the staff yesterday. Noah Joseph was the first name that came up. Noah Joseph was most recently the general manager at Purdue, where he was dealing with roster management and name, image, and likeness relations, that kind of thing. But he has spent a lot of time on the football field. He played at Drake in the late 90s and has coached really all over the place since then. Coached with Indiana, coached at North Texas, was a co-defensive coordinator at Montana State, up in the Big Sky. He was at Eastern Illinois for a short period, coached at Eastern Kentucky, Iowa State. He's been all over the place. So that's a guy who's had kind of experience 2 different places, one on the field and one in the general manager department. Again, I'm not going to make too big a deal out of these hires, these analyst hires. They're just extra eyes, and guys that have been in college football for 25 years can certainly be valuable, both with relationships when it comes to recruiting, as well as just with football acumen and knowledge they can help with in terms of breaking down film and making sure that the on-field coaching staff has as much information as they possibly can. That's the name of the game. When the NCAA said you can have as many support staff as you possibly want, everybody that had money went and got as many as they could possibly grab. Saban had a virtual army of crimson-clad analysts, paroling the football complex in Tuscaloosa, and the smart teams have followed suit. And certainly LSU has looked into that. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know a ton about Noah Joseph, and I'm not going to spend 45 minutes digging into Noah Joseph's background because he's an analyst on the defensive side of the football, and we'll kind of leave it at that. I am intrigued by the other addition to LSU football's staff because it kind of rings into my childhood a little bit. LSU hired Tim Rattay as an analyst. Most of you probably have heard the name Tim Rattay, but there's certainly going to be some of you that have no idea who that is at all. I grew up in Shreveport in North Louisiana. Was born in 1988 and was certainly a young kid when Tim Rattay was just eviscerating the record books in Ruston, Louisiana. He had Troy Edwards out at wide receiver, and he was just lighting it up for the Bulldogs over in Ruston. From 96 to 99, he just rewrote the record books. He finished second all-time in college football history at that point in total offense at Louisiana Tech. He ended up hanging around in the NFL for more than 6 years with San Francisco. He ended up in the UFL and then started his coaching career there and has been a coach ever since. He has coached with the Las Vegas Locomotives. That's where he was in the UFL and took a job there as a wide receivers coach. Then he went back to his alma mater, Louisiana Tech, coached wide receivers for 3 years and coached quarterbacks for the next 2 years. And when he did that, he worked alongside Joe Sloan briefly in Ruston. Then you went to the Washington Redskins at the time in 2019 to be the quarterbacks coach. And since 2020, he's been coaching the quarterbacks at Oklahoma State. You understand that Mike Gundy played quarterback. He handles their offense at Oklahoma State. So you're kind of just implemented into that system there. But he has made the move down to Baton Rouge and is going to be an analyst offensively on the staff. That's a guy who clearly has a wealth of football knowledge. When you are a player, even at the level he was at, which was the WAC at the time, when you're able to throw for that many yards, you've got a really good understanding of what you're doing offensively. Tim Rattay did not have a cannon for an arm, did not have, some sort of elite level offense. He had a really good wide receiver in Troy Edwards, who was an NFL player, but he obviously understood what he was doing under center at that point. And then you go to the NFL and you play for as long as he did with San Francisco for those 5 years, and then spent some time with the Buccaneers, Titans on the practice squad, and the Arizona Cardinals before moving on to the UFL. I mean, that's a guy who's been around the highest level of football and certainly has a great understanding. So again, I don't mean to overemphasize the importance of an analyst, but it did that. I mean, that name is one that I'll just remember because when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, Louisiana Tech was scoring a bajillion points, and it was just something that I was aware of in that North Louisiana ecosystem. And now all of a sudden, Rattay comes back down. I'm confident that Joe Sloan had something to do with that. So I think that's a positive to add him into the offensive support staff. So Tim Rattay, as well as Noah Joseph being added to LSU's coaching staff as analyst, and they'll start things up with spring practice. We actually got the dates for LSU spring football practice yesterday. Those were released, and I put them up on LouisianaSports.net, and it should come as no surprise to anyone who has been listening to me for 2 days or to the morning show guys a little bit earlier that the Wi-Fi can be a little spotty, so I went to pull up the dates of practice and got kicked off the internet there. However, I'm going to pull them up here very shortly because LSU is starting up spring practice here shortly. There's my internet, and there we are. So they will start things up on March the 8th. That's a Saturday. They'll practice 15 times. That'll culminate on April the 12th. So a month and 4 days from right now, we'll have LSU spring football practice, and certainly we'll have you covered here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge, as well as LouisianaSports.net. We're going to step aside, take a time out at the top of the hour. When we come back, Darren Smith talking Chiefs next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Invite you to head over to Airline at Piku to see them, or you can do all your shopping right there online. The convenience that Genesis of Baton Rouge allows you is amazing. They will allow you to shop the entire inventory online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. They'll also have one of their brand ambassadors come to you. They will come to you so you can test drive. If you're at work, they can come to you. If you're at home, they can come to you. You get behind the wheel with one of those brand ambassadors. You understand how sleek, stylish, comfortable, and full of all the bells and whistles those Genesis are, and you decide that's the car for you. You don't have to go to the dealership to sign any contracts or get anything done. They'll just leave it with you. You can do digital delivery or e-contracts, and you can be on your way. It's so easy, so simple, so painless. It's all there at Genesis. Find them online at genesisofbatonrouge.com.